Intake orchestration is a term that's becoming much more regularly used in the supply management industry. It has what we call a supplier information and event management capability, which is akin to intake orchestration. Beyond that of having just contract lifecycle management, supplier relationship management and third-party risk management capabilities. Intake orchestration for us and system information and event management basically leverages our integration framework and architecture, where we have the ability to integrate with platforms and providers that you can see listed here, from SAP Ariba to Salesforce to Dun and Bradstreet to IntegrityNext, for different use cases, but then help to further triage, case manage and automate a lot of the insights that come out of those platforms. The options that you have with integrating with Brooklyn is that there are 3 capabilities. You can do 1, 2 or all 3 for every integration, or just one. The most basic being we can get data fed from existing system and stored either as a chunk of data or used to update metadata fields in Brooklyn if that data is golden source held somewhere else, and we can take all that information in so that the burden of updating the metadata in Brooklyn is greatly reduced. Similarly, we can integrate with solutions or services where there is insight that's being derived from those platforms, and we can do what we call alert and act. So we can look at those platforms, create rules against the data signature that an organisation is looking for, and then take action off the back of that. So either start an event or trigger something from happening. And we can also then visualise those insights. So as the data comes in and we're either feeding, storing it or alerting or acting on it, it means we have that data set. So we can build complex interactive business intelligence dashboards that can be viewed by supplier and contract managers, and they don't need access to that third-party system that might be owned by some other department and not accessible. This here is an example of data feed and store. So you can see down the bottom we've got a typical news feed that's come in. The news feed is initially matched to the suppliers that there are in Brooklyn, and this is fed across the bottom of the screen as a ticker, but also then the data is stored against the organisation profile and record as a historic list of news indicated from a sentiment basis, whether it's positive, negative or neutral. You can plug all your existing feeds in here. If you have feeds equivalent like RSS feeds, etc. in your business that our supplier sent, you can plug it in and do exactly the same, stream them across the bottom or store them against the supplier or contract. This is an example in the same category where we are using a field that's held in Brooklyn that's being updated by another system, so we can turn that field to read only by default, so no other user can update it, because it's expected that a third-party system is going to update that, ensuring that data integrity remains as expected. This is an example of alert and act. So we integrate with Dun and Bradstreet. Dun and Bradstreet has an endpoint called a financial stress score. What we do is set up a connection between your Dun and Bradstreet account and that relevant endpoint. We then watch that for a match in terms of supplier information, and if we detect a drop on one of your suppliers, we then issue a survey. It's a financial distress survey that basically goes out to the supplier, says that your financial stress score has taken a hit as such, and please fill out this survey and assessment to see whether we need any further information, or it's just a late filing, or you actually have issues in your company that we need to be made aware of. Beyond that, visualised insights. This is an example of visualised insights. We partner with a company called IntegrityNext. Organisations and their ESG teams have access to these type of specialist tooling, but in this case our partner organisation had need to access data, not all of the data and all of the capability, but just reference it for their supplier management functions, so they can easily see, based on what suppliers there are in the system, how they're faring from an ESG perspective based on this integration. Essentially, from a workflow perspective, the Brooklyn Solutions platform is a scalable event intake and process management solution. Be whether that initial action is system or user initiated, so it's either coming from a system or a user manually triggers it, create essentially disconnected processes. So think of fragility case management, where you've got like COVID epidemic happens and you want to look at that and assess the impact and then apply that to how many organisations and contracts that's affecting. We've got something like demand management that comes in that you don't necessarily know if you have an organisation in place today that can deal with this demand, or you've got to do a sourcing activity, so you can do a process there, or you can create a third party as such, and then with a contract or a legal agreement that's under that. And from those elements, you can then sort of case manage on the basis that you can have secondary events, so you can have review meetings about a process, an organisation or a contract, run risk events, action items, surveys and assessments or metrics against any level. But then you can also, against under an organisation and under a contract, you can do a connected process flow, which is exactly the same as a disconnected process flow, albeit it's definitely related to that organisation or to that legal agreement. So in an organisation perspective, think an actual risk that is centric to that organisation. So that organisation has financial stability, trouble, issues. You want to start risk process off against that, analysing that, or contract dispute, contract change is a contract or legal agreement related process flow. And under them, you can then have the same thing against like tertiary events, review meetings, and all the same repeats. And you can then connect these and relate other entities and events. You can relate all these to another process, or you can relate them to a disconnected process or an organisation or a third party. Then you can repeat. So these chains and these relationships can be as long as you need them to be. There's just a very comprehensive business process modelling capability that ensures that you can define all of your intake and supply management processes within Brooklyn. This is an example here of a data set that can come in off of an endpoint or a CSV. In this case, it's a made-up example for bus transport services, whether they've hit SLA or not, and this is a made-up data set. In this case, the data set just says, was it on time, was it not? We've got an SLA tolerance of 5 minutes either way, and you can see those that have failed or breached SLA. What we then do with no code is then set up a connection to either the endpoint or to that CSV data to be brought into Brooklyn. You can see it's been brought into Brooklyn here. We've then set up a bus SLA breach. Essentially it says look at the bus SLA breached column. If it equals true, then create an event. What we then do in Brooklyn is then set up a policy that says for the contract management team to issue a survey about bus SLA breaching, and it basically says when this, use the data bridge rule, when the data bridge rule bus SLA breach is breached, etc., match the contract name to the contract, and then fire a survey. And this is an example of that event happening. Emails come out for a survey invitation for a SLA breach. Go into the email, basically it gives you some period of time to answer it. You go to the survey and then you populate all the details of the survey, submit that, and then you can then report on that and how that's going from a survey perspective and how that is being tracked. We can then dashboard that same data. So this is the same data, but then it's been dashboarded rather than just reporting on a process. It only took us 20 minutes to create as an example, and again it's no code. It's the same as using Power BI or Tableau to create and show where these failures have been essentially.